Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of flying the Beechcraft Duke Turbo by Black Square. Today's video we're going to be dealing with a kind of cleaning up climb, sort of doing some of the normal maintenance tasks during cruise, as well as getting ready for descent. Let's get started. So right now we have ourselves climbing smoothly. We took off from CYYZ, that's Toronto, kind of making our way all the way over to Bradley International Airport. And one of the things I noticed during my climb here is we got this little warning light that popped on. It's kind of giving us a quick little holler that the oil door is closed. So of course you open the ice deflect instead. But one of the things you got to know about that is you're going to get a little heads up to say the ice door is doing X, Y, and Z. And of course, when you come scroll down here, you can see the actual temperature gauge that is referring to. So on the final part of a climb, when you're working with this particular aircraft, there's just a couple little battles you're going to be fighting. The first one, of course, you're going to be dealing with is the fact that your torque has been slowly bleeding off, and your ITT has also been slowly bleeding off. Notice, by the way, all the warning lights came on just to tell you that it's overheated, but it's not overheated, that it's overheated, that's overheated. And of course, you get a big, massive cabin pressure warning here, which is just letting us know that we're not getting enough air quick enough into the system. Now, if it does happen, of course, you can always come over here and give this thing a couple little victory cranks right here, and it will go ahead and pressurize that. Usually when this happens to you, this is related to climbing faster than the cabin can actually pressurize. One of the cool things here is you can actually crank up the pressurization rate substantially, and that'll basically allow it to keep up with how fast the aircraft is actually climbing. This whole system really needs its own separate video because it does get kind of, not tricky, but it's just one more thing is what I like to say. But you can see here, if we really need to blow some ears on our poor passengers, we can actually dump the pressure, and that will certainly let them know who we are, kind of a thing like that. It's not very pleasant, but that's what this little red light is, in case that does come up during cruise. So our cruise altitude today is going to be 25,000 feet. Go ahead and pop that off. And you can see that's going to start flickering on and off quite a bit. And the reason it's doing that is because we're just stabilizing that now. Of course, so once we get a little more altitude underneath us, we can go ahead and level off and kind of get ready. The other chore you're going to be dealing with on the way up, other than communications and things like that, is monitoring, of course, the temperature of aircraft. And you can see it's down to 49 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to go pop this onto auto heat. But the interesting thing with this aircraft is we have no heat control. We have no built-in system. What we have instead are the two gas turbines. And you can actually see here that this is the hot air flowing out of them into our system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull these two out. And what this is going to do is allow the hot air from our engines to come rushing into our aircraft. I'm actually going to flip this to manual heat, in which you'll see almost immediately as our aircraft is going to be instantly getting very hot very quickly. And you can see the hot air rushing in, coming through our blower, and basically getting cookiness inside of here. This happens so quickly it will make your head spin, especially if the differential pressure of the cabin is able to get as high as it can. Now, this is a problem you'll always be having on this aircraft just because of the sheer speed that this aircraft gets up to climb. So what we're going to do is we're going to start warming this back up a little bit here. And depending on altitude will determine how far you're going to have to pull these out. Sometimes I open one and close the other, kind of a deal like that, or I'll crack both of them just a little bit to sort of stabilize those kind of things. It's kind of up to you how you sort of want to attack that, depending on what's going on with that particular scenario. But I'm happy with that. We're going to warm up very quickly here. And again, little warning light's going to go off and all those things. I'm actually going to flip it back to auto here. So now that we're at our cruise altitude, we can start dealing with a couple other little things. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close up my lovely oil doors here. And since we're moving so fast through the air and the outside air temperature is, let's take a look here. We're looking at minus 22. That's enough. And you'll see here, if I look down at the temperature gauge on them, they're pretty low as it is. So I think we're safe to go ahead and close those. They will probably scream at you in a few minutes once they get up to about 50 degrees, but that's going to happen. We're also getting a warning that the ice door is off, which is okay, because if you actually look out the window here, you can see there is no precipitation, so we don't have to worry about damaging our turbines. We can go ahead and do that, and just like I promised you, by the way, do you notice that we got the oil door closed warning almost immediately? Called it. So the other chore, of course, we have to deal with, now that we're finally warming up, the pressurization situation has been taken care of. We know that we've got, that's just the master caution for the oil door closed, by the way. So we've got that set, all those things are set. We're good to go. We're now ready to set our cruise power. So cruise power in this one is relatively straightforward. It's the nice thing about being a turboprop is you don't have to worry about the details so much. But coming right out of the manual here, I can see, oh, well, apparently that's open. That's nice. Go away. The nice thing is we can take a look at these values right away and determine what we need to do. So we can do, obviously, maximum continuous power at 25 grand. That's 1010 and 2190 on the RPM. If we wanted that much, you can see here that's going to give us an airspeed of 292. That's a bit high in my opinion. So instead, if you scroll down a little bit, you can see we can do 1020 and 2000. That's going to give us 287, which is a beautiful amount of power there. So I'm going to go ahead and set that. So what makes this a little different is we can play with the RPM all we want, but it's not going to have as crazy an impact on performance as you'd probably expect. So I'm going to go ahead and start pulling this one down. You've got to go slow on power adjustments on this thing. And notice, by the way, your torque is going to spike on. That's part of the fun, as they like to say. So we're looking for 2,000 revolutions per minute, comrades. These two will not agree with each other. That's just what happens. I actually appreciate that. It's a detail that they got basically perfect, and I really respect that. So we're going to pull it back just a little bit. And again, I'm being so gentle here, trying to pull it just enough. And again, you can see one of my engines is slightly faster than the other engine. If you try to play the game between the two, you're never going to get these both to agree. Now, looking up here at my torque, I can see that I'm limited to 1,020 torque. So we're going to go ahead and start feeding the torque back in here. And again, I'm pushing my throttle, my power lever forward here to try to get it. Notice my RPM is going to stay pretty much the same. Pushing the throttle all the way forward. And that's it. So if you take a look now, my throttle is all the way forward, my propeller control is set correctly, but we are not getting 1,020 torque out of both engines. And now the simple reason for that, of course, is the air temperature is different from a standard day. It's a slightly warm day, so we're never going to get the same power that we would get otherwise. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to take a quick peek over here, and now we can see our airspeed is climbing. Remember, this is true air, this is indicated airspeed, true airspeed on the outside. And of course, if we take a look over here, you can see we're managing, 321 knots. And my travel time is 50 minutes. Toronto to Connecticut in an hour and 10 minutes is insane with something that's got a propeller on it. I'm very impressed with that. Keep in mind we have a tailwind. I knew we'd have a tailwind today, which is one of the reasons why I chose it. Other things we can play with, of course, so while we're cruising around like this, is like I said, every once in a while, just take a look at your temperatures, make sure your oil temperature looks okay, and I can see very clearly it's in the dead center of it. It's all right. Again, that light is there to warn you about things like that. Other things you could do while you're kind of flying around here is, again, playing Space Invaders, is just kind of fits with the temperature. I can see right now we're looking at about 64 degrees. That's my temperature. But the cool thing we can do here, of course, is if we wanted to really cool this thing off in a hurry, we could come in here, we could basically crank this to manual heat like that, and it's going to let both gas turbines from either engine basically roast us. And now you can see the temperature comes up here really, really fast. It's also a good way to go ahead and take a look at the pressure, which at the moment is perfectly fine for us. Outside air temperature, by the way, is balmy minus 22 on the F scale. That's enough. That's enough. That's pretty cold. If you touch the windshield, you'd be like, wow, it's cold outside. 68 Fahrenheit, 20 Celsius. That's plenty. I'm going to go pop that to auto heat. That's fine. And that's kind of basically your chores for flights. Obviously, monitor fuel temperatures. If there's a massive fuel imbalance, there's actually this little light that's going to come on that's going to give you a heads up that you made that mistake. So just be kind of mindful of that if that does occur. One of the things I will mention here is you've got this little crossfeed section, and it's actually pretty cool how this works. You can crossfeed both engines, or you can tell one engine to suck out of the other engine, as weird as that sounds. Sounds way dirtier than it should be. But one of the things you'll notice here is we have a left engine, right engine, and we've got 118 gallons in the right engine. Let's say I want to balance these. So I'm going to open up the fuel panel real quickly so you can see what this looks like. If I take my right engine and I click this into this position, what you observe we're now pulling out of the left fuel tank. If I take this one and flip it to this position, you observe that we're now pulling out of the right fuel tank. Does everybody see how everybody gets that one wrong? You can go ahead and snap that. Now you'll see you're drawing from both tanks. Now the nice thing is we're not allowed to have a massive imbalance between these two. And again, you can see that they're not reading correctly, even though Flight Sim did a nice job. We could sit here and run off of that other tank for a while. We could also cross-feed them for a bit. But you'll find that they're not going to self-balance like a lot of other aircraft do. It's just kind of the nature of this particular airplane sort of a thing. So what I'm going to do, of course, is I'm going to fast forward to a kind of skip trip here. We have 47 minutes of flying, but don't worry, it's just a few seconds for you folks. Oh man, we're moving. We're moving. So one of the things I would mention real quickly as we're just kind of scrolling along here, enjoying a nice relaxing flight, is every once in a while, just want to take a quick look at all your temperatures and pressures and things like that, which are, like I said, pretty nominal and everything like that. But one really cool trick is if you come down to the engine trend monitor down here, and you go to the page up button, you can actually go ahead and set the different pages that you need here, which makes it a little bit easier to kind of see exactly what you're looking for. And again, you can set your ITTLs and torques and all that stuff. And all that stuff is visible. But one of the things I wanted to bring up real quick as I'm just kind of ripping through here is you can actually change this to a navigational page. gauge. And what it will do is it'll give you all sorts of useful information as far as how far you have to go. It's going to give you an ETA. You can see pretty close. It gives you ETE. All that other information is basically provided for you on here. But there's also a fuel option down here. And the cool thing with the fuel option here is when you're scooting through this, you can actually see exactly how much more fuel it's going to take to get to your specific destination here. You can see how much gas we're going to have. You can also take a look at how your range is going. You can see your fuel flow per engine, which, like I said, will never be even. That's the truth. You can see how much you've used, you have to move. It's just a really, really nice tool. The real reason I brought everybody here is to discuss the problem we're going to be facing in a few minutes, and that's when do we start coming back down? We're at 25,000 feet. If you were an airliner, your brain would immediately go, aha, all we have to do is we have to take this number, and then we're going to go ahead and multiply by 3, which means we need to start our descent at 75 nautical miles. That's correct. Very nice. Well done. Well done. The bigger problem for us is not that. The bigger problem for us is the fact that we're not doing airliner speeds. Even though you could take a look at this little needle right here, you can see we're doing about, 317. One of the things that you do need to be mindful of is the fact that when we descend, I use 200 knots kind of as my basis. Now, the reason that works so well for us, of course, is if you happen to have a calculator handy, we can do some quick math to sort of work this out. So we're doing 200 knots, and we know we're at 25,000 feet. So we need to come down in 25 minutes. Everybody's like, oh, I'll just do 25 minutes in the GPS. No, don't do that. If you do that, you're going to run into a problem where as you descend, the air is going to get thicker and you're going to be going slower. Your numbers are going to be all goofed up. Oh, I can't do that. So instead, what we need to do is figure out how long of an hour 25 minutes is. So if I do 25 minutes divided by 60 minutes an hour, that's 0.41 of an hour. Now, if I multiply that by 220 knots, which, if you're wondering where I got that from, we get actually, we'll call it 200 knots. We'll be fair. We'll do 200 knots. You will see that gets me a number of 83. Now, 83 is very useful for us because that's going to basically giving us sort of a heads up as to some of these values. What this is telling us is how far away we need to start coming down, 83 nautical miles, which is convenient. So let's go ahead and put that calculator away real fast, and let's go take a look at how far away we actually are. So if I look here, I notice I'm 134 nautical miles away. Your brain sees that 25 number, and your brain goes, let's go, 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 let's go. Come on, man, there's a tailwind. Let's go, let's go, let's go. We could, but if we did that, we would probably be done descending in about 50 miles, and we'd, be just sort of sitting there staring and going, huh? As we realize we now have to complete the rest of the flight at an inefficient altitude for us. So that doesn't work too well. So we're going to go ahead and take that number of 83 and roll with it in a few seconds. All right, it's time. So we're going to start our descent. So I'm going to go ahead and dial this into our altitude here, which is going to be 1,800 feet for a particular destination. Go ahead and dial that in right now. Looking pretty groovy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go ahead and press the at button. I'm going to give this a couple taps. And I'm going to go ahead and take my throttle. I'm going to pull it back just a tiny bit. Again, just a tiny bit. You don't need much here. So now we have to start babysitting the plane on the way down. Now, I've descended a lot of planes over the years, but this one absolutely takes the cake as far as what you need to pay attention to. Our biggest danger is overspeed, and you can see here I'm down to about 900 on the torque, and I'm doing about 200 on the needle there. It's a little bit too fast, so I can actually back this out a little bit and kind of slowing us down. Again, we're a pretty high drag airplane, which makes our life simpler. But the problem is we plan for 1,000 feet per minute, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a couple more taps and pitch down. Kind of fits with my throttle a little bit, and we're just looking for the moment where we get equilibrium between our speed here, our 1,000 feet per minute, and whatever our torque value is. And the good news is, generally this value is going to be pretty not constant because it's constant, but constant because you're going to be sitting there pulling the needle back every few seconds. What I've seen some people do is like braking down a hill kind of a thing. You can basically give it a little tug back here. Now let's talk about temperature and pressurization for a second here. So right now it is a balmy 71 degrees, which is pretty comfortable, but we're going to be descending into much hotter air. So one of the things we need to be thinking about is how to keep the thing from overheating. And there's a couple different philosophies. The simplest one, as you probably noticed I accidentally did earlier, is I basically push this in just a little bit. Now the other problem we have to do is we have to think about pressurization. Now there's two schools of thought here. Let me show you one. So what we can do is we can bust out the old calculator again. Let me go ahead and get this sucker out. Boop. There it is, pretty good. We know we have to go 24,000 feet, and we know we have to give up 11,000 feet of air. So we know that's going to be about 2. And the reason that's important to us is we can come down here, and we can actually dial this thing down to sea level to have a nice smooth depressurization. The problem is we're descending at 1,000 feet per minute, and our cabin only has 11,000 feet to actually lose the pressure. Now, if you do the math on that, you say, oh, 500 feet per minute. That's as simple as it needed to be. Why did you make that calculation sound worse than it is? Well, because we have to be very careful, and I'll show you what I mean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this. I'm actually going to set this guy as well. And I'm going to limit the depressurization here. Now, the mistake everybody makes is they say, oh, look at that. We're at 22,000 feet. 500 feet per minute gets us down to 11,000. We're good to go. It never works that way. Never. So what I actually recommend doing is adding about 200 feet per minute to whatever that calculation is if you want to do the fancy depressurization method that I'm doing here. The other recommendation, of course, is if you come down a little bit slower, you don't have to sit here and fight this thing. But one of the things you have to now monitor on the way down is make sure you still come down at about the correct speed. Not only that, but now you have to make sure you don't max out the differential pressure. You can see right now at about 700 feet per minute, the differential pressure needle is staying about the same because I'm maintaining my 1,000 feet per minute downwards. You all got that, right? I'm looking at you sitting up there on the wing, Mr. Gremlin. The important thing you have to remember here is your cabin depressurization rate must never be less than half of whatever your current vertical speed is. That's a general rule of thumb whenever you're dealing with pressurization systems. Like I said, that's a video for another day because a lot of people are going to have questions on that because you're going to see the little angry red line come off in a few moments. Now, another thing I noticed is looking out the windows, the weather's perfect. So I'm not going to bother with any sort of inertial separators or anything like that. But I am going to go ahead, like I said, enjoy my nice 800 pounds of torque here so we can get a nice and smooth descent. So looking over here, I can see I've got about 65 nautical miles to go. I'm coming 1,000 feet per minute. That's 22 minutes. You can see it looks like I'm never going to make it. I'm never going to make it. And again, that's because of that really, really strong tailwind that we have at the moment. I actually need to adjust my pitch here a little bit, come down at 1,000 feet. Remember, if this spikes up to 1,200 feet per minute, I have to lose at least 600 feet per minute. Otherwise, you're going to overpressurize and it's going to blow out the back. So for me, I made that little tiny adjustment and it's just not enough. So I'm actually going to increase the rate of depressurization just a tiny bit. I mean, it's going to be uncomfortable. But again, you have to be careful with this. And what some people do is they come down at like 500 feet per minute to make it real nice in the ears, which is like luxurious as far as I'm concerned. But keep in mind, if you do that, you're going to have to kind of be juggling all that. So for our next video course, we're going to be taking a look at landing this thing once we get a little bit closer to our destination. One thing you notice probably is temperature staying the same, even though we've only cracked these. Trust me, it takes nothing to get heat off of those two turbines as far as keeping it warm. And in really, really kind of mild climates, you can basically shut one or alternate which one that you want to run kind of a thing. So anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Enjoy.